Now we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of what Indians are all about.
I still say we Indian people are believers in the truth. This is the way of life that was given to your people. You're born an Indian, you're going to die an Indian. Indianness is a good life. You're facing an Indian this afternoon.
Good Saturday afternoon out there, everyone, and welcome to your number one source for Native American television news. It's Native News Today, and I, of course, am your host, Jason Salzman, and I am joined today in the Mvskoke Media newsroom. We're in the newsroom today, and
Hello.
So for that, I have with me the editor of the Mvskoke Nation News, Mr. Sterling Cosper.
Good morning, everyone.
Yes, thank you for being here with us today, Sterling. We're going to be talking about a lot of things, but most importantly, the Tribal Employment Rights Office, or TERO, as it's acronymed as at a lot of tribal nations. But we ourselves have a TERO office, and it has been for quite some time now studied, looked at. Do we need to change it? Do we need to repeal it? We're going to talk about all of that in the journey to where we are at now. At today's council meeting earlier today, a decision was made on that. We'll have further coverage of that because we're, of course, before press time on that. But it was they did talk about today. There was items on the agenda regarding TERO, so we will sort of get you up to speed on the issue as it is here at Mvskoke Creek Nation. But Sterling, also, you, I, and a few other staff members, Darren DeLon, Chelsea Rich, Jessica McBride, just returning from New Orleans, Louisiana. Beautiful city. We really enjoyed the arts, the culture. As journalists, you know, you go around, you take it all in, you sort of give your opinions on it, your likes, your dislikes, whatever, but you break it down, and we really enjoyed the city, had some great times. We were able to get out and mingle with the people, but really primarily there for the Native American Journalists Association's annual conference as part of the Society of Professional Journalists Excellence in Journalism 2016 National Conference. So it's neat. This year was with SPJ and everything, so we get a chance to be with some people that write for the Boston Globe or are anchoring at CNN.
Yeah.
And they want to talk to us about our Free Press Act, and they want to talk to us about what's going on at tribal nations as far as media is concerned.
So it's really special because I think with the pipeline issue, for example, folks are like, why does it take so long to get coverage? Why is it not being covered? And, you know, a journalist to journalist, we get to have conversations and educate the broader media about our cultures a little bit.
Yeah, and you kind of understand or help them to understand why these are issues that not only need coverage, but need faster coverage, need coverage on the front lines, need to hear from the people themselves so that the nation abroad can get a better idea of what we're talking about and just what is at the heart of the issue.
Yeah, and, you know, you always, of course, I think a lot of our readers or watchers might see other outlets cover Native issues and have like talk to the screen or talk to the page and be like, why did you cover that way? And it offers that unique opportunity to kind of maybe put forward not a critique, but help educate our media peers as to how Natives feel, how their issues are covered.
Yeah, and the Mvskoke Media in a united front accepted the Elias Boudinot Award for Free Press from the Native American Journalists Association. Very proud to receive that award, but more so, afterwards, I was more proud because there were different tribal media departments coming up to us asking, how do we do this at our tribe? We want to spearhead the efforts to have a free press at our tribe. We want to do this here. We want to do this here. And so that was invigorating. That was really encouraging because, you know, we're never going to be fully sovereign until we can take care of our own matters. And that includes watching ourselves.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things we told them is you guys out there are the biggest element of that. If you want to see it, then it will be done.
Yeah, we had a great time in New Orleans, but happy to be back. Happy to be beholden to our citizens and getting them the information and all of the things that they need to be well aware of what's going on with tribal government, and that will be included in our TERO wrap-up. Do not go anywhere. We're going to take our first break, and we'll be right back with the rest of Native News Today.
It's more than just an associate degree. It's a life-changing experience.
You'll see a lot of cultural features here on the campus. You'll see a symbol of the mound, which goes back to the history of Mvskoke people as being in that Mississippian time period, that mound building society. That really welcomes our students whenever they first get here.
The college in itself is beyond the building, is the people.
They're passionate, very passionate about what they teach, and it shows whenever they're teaching.
The instructors and the administration, they really believe in their students here.
After a couple classes, I began to notice that it kind of felt as if I were returning back to something that has been lost for like a long time. As I learned more about the history of my people, to discover that there were very many great people that did a lot of good things for their people, for their nations, and that those people were American Indian and Native American, it kind of brings out a sense of pride that was not really there before.
There is a future for our people.
Looking for your next 18-hole adventure? Then take a look at Fountainhead Creek Golf Club. Nestled in the beautiful confines of Lake Eufaula State Park, large sloping greens and well-placed bunkers characterize the Mvskoke Creek Nation's Floyd Farley designed course and offers a fine test of skill for any golfer. Stay up on all the latest gear and equipment with a visit to our pro shop. Have lunch at the Turn at the Clubhouse Grill. We're waiting to accommodate you at Fountainhead Creek. Give us a call at 918-689-3209 or visit fountainheadgolf.com to book your next round. Fountainhead Creek Golf Club, close to home, far from ordinary.
We believe if you teach a man to fish, you can feed him for a lifetime. We believe that transitioning convicted citizens back into our communities enhances public safety. We believe that every citizen, even ex-prisoners, are important and are capable of change. We believe in reclaiming our citizens and investing them back into a culture that embraces healing and restoration.
We believe
In reintegration.
And welcome back to Native News Today. Once again, in the newsroom today with Sterling Cosper, the editor of the Mvskoke Nation newspaper. And we are talking about TERO, Tribal Employment Rights Office. What is it? And several tribes have developed TEROs and have them in place, including us as the Mvskoke Creek Nation since 2012. Basically, Sterling, it is a tribal preference for hiring, employment, but also in gaining contracts with businesses that want to do business with the tribe. So we're taking care of our Creek businesses.
Yes, a lot of people know what TERO is. It's that very simple acronym. To most people, that basically says that we want to give preference in hiring our citizens on all fronts, whether it be our vendors or even big contracts. What a lot of people may not know is it's actually a fairly involved law that's actually accommodated by even more involved policy with the office. So that's what the conversation has been around. Starting May 10th, there's been several bills proposed by several representatives to both look at repealing it or actually fixing it. What was voted on this morning was actually a bill to repeal it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it would be over there, and stay tuned for developments on that on the outcome.
Yeah.
And still, there's one sitting in the background that may come in and propose a new law similar to TERO.
Yeah, and as you can see on your screen here, we're sort of going through this timeline. It's a fantastic reference. Folks, this is on MvskokeMedia.com. You can go and see just for yourselves actually a timeline of events, sort of chronologically, that have brought TERO.
Strongly advise it.
To,
It's been pretty complex.
It's very complex, but this sort of simplifies it in a way that you can actually see it. It's something that you can interact with, and you can go at your own pace to sort of read up and everything like that. And I encourage you to Google search, do your research on your own about TERO and what it means for different tribes, things like that. So with all of this in mind, we wanted to talk with some of the principals that are involved in the issue. One of the latest legislations to come up to repeal was actually sponsored by Dode Barnett. Mm-hmm. We had her in studio to talk about this TERO issue. So I want to thank you, Dode Barnett, a representative on the National Council and also a member of the Health, Education, and Wellness Committee, for being with us as we start to delve into the TERO, what has become an issue with the Mvskoke Creek Nation. Just to give some timeline and some foundation for the issue, back in May, Adam Jones brings forth a repeal of TERO. It's postponed and continues in August. You actually sponsored some legislation as well at the latest HEW committee meeting, which is one of the more animated and colorful we've had in a while at Mvskoke Creek Nation. Issues came up as well. So to say all of that is to not be able to escape the fact that there are issues and concerns with TERO as it is at Mvskoke Creek Nation. What I would ask you, Ms. Barnett, is that from what you've heard, what you've gathered, information you've gathered, things that you've heard from your colleagues and from those that have brought forth legislation, what are the main issues that we're dealing with here with the way TERO is now at MCN, in your opinion?
Sure. Well, yes, just in my opinion, I think, there have been a lot of issues over the last couple of years since we've had TERO. I think, anything new with an entity as big as Creek Nation to roll it out nationwide is huge undertaking, no matter if it sounds like it's the simplest thing in the world, it never is, because we are such a huge entity. So there were a lot of issues that stemmed from the original TERO law. The original TERO law has been amended a couple of times with minor revisions. And I think the biggest issues that we really had from the very beginning, though, were education about what TERO is and isn't, what managers had to comply with, how you had to be in compliance, what that meant, what were the ramifications if you didn't comply, those sorts of things. Those are the things that we should have in the very beginning, had mandatory training for all of the managers to sit down and say, this is what it is, this is what it isn't, and had a cheat sheet for all those managers. And if they had any questions, to always call that TERO department just to make sure, because everyone wants to follow the law. Everyone wants to do a good job in, whatever capacity they serve the nation. So I think that was one of our mistakes that we didn't do very well. Another issue with the TERO department itself is that we had a lot of turnover in the TERO department last year. Within I believe it was 15-month span, we had 4 managers for that department. That's crazy. You cannot have any consistency. You can't build stability in that capacity. So the last manager that we had, John Overacre, was amazing. He was very professional, and he really mentored his employees, in my opinion. You asked my opinion, this is my opinion. So, he really brought a lot of stability to that position in that department whenever he came. Before he came to that department, I was getting calls weekly from construction people, from employees, from citizens who weren't happy with TERO experience. And whenever he came in, I think I got one call the whole time he was there. So whatever he was doing, he was holding it down. Another mistake that we made is that once we passed that law, we should have revisited it pretty regularly, and we did not. And that really should have been, it just really depends on different issues. Sometimes initiative or changes are council-led, sometimes they're executive branch-led. And, in a perfect world, it would be both entities working together in order to bring those changes about. But we should have revisited the law a lot sooner. But last year was an election year. There were tons of things going on. We had all the healthcare issues that we were dealing with as far as the departments and the money goes. And I just really think that it was one of those things that should have happened earlier. So,
to revisit the recent HEW committee that we referenced earlier, one of the things that came up that you pointed out specifically was we had a legislation to repeal, and then later on in the agenda we had a legislation to sort of amend policies and look at things like that. That obviously led to you mentioning, well, maybe we should address them together. Can you talk about your motivation for bringing that up right then and the reasoning behind that?
Sure. Well, there was a previous legislation that had been introduced that I had sponsored. There's different reasons people sponsor bills, but sometimes it's something that we have been directly involved in developing. Sometimes it's something that comes up on the list and you pick it up and you sponsor it and present it to committee. Or maybe, the executive branch asks you to sponsor something. It just depends on the situation. So that particular bill I sponsored because I did want to be a part of that conversation. I had already been having conversations with the TERO department, John Overacre, and Andrew Stacy, who's a Creek citizen who is an employee of that department. And, I'd already had conversations with them about how can we make this better? How can we make these changes that are going to line all of this out? Because the current administration is still dealing with problems almost on a daily basis from the lack of consistency previously of TERO. So even, 9 months into a new administration, there's still these lingering problems that are going on. So I understand it's a frustration. It was a pain point for all the council. It was a pain point for the administration from day one whenever they came in. But I wanted to lead that conversation, so I picked up that bill. And last month at committee, I had postponed it until this month, until we had a chance to really put something forward that came from the TERO department. They're the ones that work with the citizens. They're the ones that have been boots on the ground in these efforts. And so I felt it was fair, for them to have a voice and to bring that forward. So when the old legislation came up, I had asked that we address the other bill, maybe move that legislation to the end of the agenda so that the other bill could be addressed. And that was not the will of the committee, and that's okay. It's a committee process. So if it's not the will of the council, then it doesn't happen, and that's okay. So that bill was moved forward. And when the later legislation that I had sponsored, which were the proposed changes from the TERO department, came up, then my motion died for lack of a second. That bill was not heard.
Knowing, I know that some of us know exactly how the council works, and you may know what some of your colleagues or which way they're leaning or which way they feel about a certain legislation before it's brought before the citizenry in a regular session or even a committee meeting. Mm-hmm. I wonder, what feeling do you get? I know that you feel that TERO is something that can work at Mvskoke Creek Nation. Otherwise, you wouldn't have spoke up in the meeting. We really need to have a discussion on this. Sure. I wonder if you have enough support, do you believe, that that's shared with other council members to be able to say, we will have TERO at Creek Nation, we just need to take a look at it again, or just, hey, get rid of it and let's not even have anything like that?
Sure. I do not know. I don't have a specific count. I know it sounds maybe a little bit naive, but there really has only been one time that I've ever specifically asked my peers, will you vote for this? Mm-hmm. Generally, I try to prepare an argument that is so wonderful and riveting they can't say no. Just kidding, guys. But having a well-prepared argument or basis theory for any legislation is key to coming and bringing those topics up. Having, we have to feel comfortable with that legislation, know it's the best thing for our people to move forward with that. So I know there are others that support it as well. They've spoken out in different settings. But as far as a specific count, I really wouldn't know. There are several that were nervous about repealing TERO altogether until we had something in place that we knew what we were going to replace it with, because we have seen that in the past where we remove something that isn't working, but there's nothing to replace it, and then it takes maybe a year or 2 years, 3 years to replace it, and that's definitely not something that the majority wanted to happen. And then there's others that just think, what, we tried it and it was a good go, but we need to move on, and that's okay too.
With the way that the structure has been set up and how it's gone to this point, mm-hmm. have you heard any concerns, or are there concerns that the way that TERO has been, maybe it lends itself to benefiting specific companies over other companies? Like, for instance, has one specific company or a couple specific companies benefited from TERO more so than others because of the way it's currently set up?
Sure, there have been concerns that, if you look at the history of contracts that have been awarded specifically in the construction area, there tend to be only a short list of companies that have got those contracts. So that is a concern with the council, with the general citizenry. I don't necessarily think that was due to how TERO was set up. There were flaws with the way TERO was set up in the scoring system. You have a problem. One of the problems with the current TERO law that we had was a lack of competitive bids that were coming in. So outside bidders not knowing that process of what TERO is, what it means, maybe not bidding on a particular contract because they felt like they might not be equally considered with the TERO vendor, let's say. That was never, that we wanted competitive bidding. That's the whole reason for TERO. We do want to help our citizens move their businesses ahead and get those contracts, but if you're not competitive, at the end of the day, we have a fiduciary responsibility to the citizens, and so we have to watch those dollars and spend them as well as we can. And So there was a lack of competitive bidding. So that was another reason why there was a short list of contractors. Also, the scope and scale of some of the projects that we've done, Margaritaville expansion, for example. There aren't a lot of companies that can handle the scale of a project that size. So if you don't have that proven track record with a project that big, we just can't take a risk on a smaller company that would not have the resources or manpower to do a project of that size. So that's really my understanding from a lot of the people who were unhappy with not getting bids or not being considered for jobs. My understanding was that they were just situations that the same services would not have been provided to what the nation needed. So not that there was anything wrong with those companies. It just, if it's a fit, it's a fit. If it's not, it's not. Whether you're a TERO vendor, a Creek citizen, or non-Creek citizen.
To wrap around to back to what we had discussed a little bit earlier with the rollout of it.
Sure.
I wonder, with something of this size and undertaking, even though it's been done by other tribes and there are some things we can share and look at and ask and network about those things. To me, if I'm thinking and I'm hearing what we did and how it kind of rolled out, I wonder why it was rushed. It seemed to be rushed, as you said. Maybe we didn't take the time. Do you have any opinions on that?
As far as being rushed, I'm not exactly sure. Most of the departmental changes in those types of events are executive branch led. So the previous administration had presented this TERO law, which everyone wants, like I said, everyone wants our Creek citizens and our Creek companies to succeed. So really not having any true experience as a tribe and starting from nothing, because we really didn't have, we had a previous act that was a By Creek Act that didn't really have any teeth to it. The general language and the tone of the legislation was basically we want Creek citizens to be hired on jobs that are affecting the nation, but there wasn't any consequence if you didn't, So the TERO legislation seemed logical, TERO fees being assessed, coming in, supporting that department, having it being a self-supporting department, which we didn't really realize at the time the ramifications that were going to happen of that, contractors coming in and marking up bids, the TERO fee, so that it doesn't actually come out of their profit, which in theory may not necessarily be a bad thing if it helps ease other programs. If putting people to work helps ease social services, then maybe it's cheaper to pay that 1.5% than it is to have people in social services. I get that concept. But at the end of the day, huge jobs that we're financing, so we were being paid a 1.5% TERO fee, but we're having to borrow money to complete that project and paying financing fees on the TERO fees. That part of it didn't make any sense, and that was something that maybe we hadn't explored well enough, in my opinion, before we passed that law, and it's something that should have been revisited. There were inconsistencies as far as how TERO was administered. Some jobs were TERO jobs and some weren't. And there really wasn't anything in the law to address that. How are we going to be consistent with this? Because then I think that frustrated companies and frustrated citizens and frustrated project managers on what's what. It seemed for a while there that we were changing the regulations without good communication and good execution. Yeah.
So, again, your opinion, but TERO at Mvskoke Creek Nation, dead in the ground, on life support, or it's got a broken arm that needs a cast?
I think the brilliant thing about the Mvskoke Creek Nation is that our people are the greatest resource that we have. So if our people want to get together and brainstorm on how to keep this, it's going to happen. And if they don't, then we won't. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. So, I think it could go either way right now. And not just because I worked on that law, I really hope that we can have a quality conversation, sit down and move forward with something, whether it's called TERO. I even said that at the previous, not this past Q meeting, but the meeting before that. Even if we don't call it TERO, we can call it whatever. We can call it Nanny Boo Boo. It doesn't matter. As long as we move forward with something that is meaningful and at the end of the day puts our citizens to work and, gives our creek vendors and our creek companies a reason to come home, because a lot of our creek people don't even live in our boundaries. So if we have laws like TERO that can provide them opportunity, a lot of our people are very capable. All they need is the opportunity, and that's really what we should be here to do, is provide our citizens with opportunity.
If it's not called a TERO office and it is just a program under education and training without that title and everything like that, do you still see how it can thrive and do what we need it to do?
I think if we clean up everything that's wrong with it, the proposal that I had, the actual legislation, if you look at it, didn't change a whole lot. But there were huge changes that would be impactful in the rules and regulations of TERO and the policies and procedures of TERO. That the main thing in the actual TERO law itself was compulsory training for all of the program managers and those people that make those decisions that would need to know the TERO law intimately. So the policies and procedures, rules and regulations being lined out. Part of what the legislation also stated was that those policies and procedures would be presented from the TERO department to the chief, approved by the chief, to come back over to the council at a minimum of an annual basis, so that everyone would be clear, all of those changes would be clearly thought out, clearly communicated. But I think it has merit to thrive wherever we put it. I always thought that it would be a good fit under tribal construction. I never really saw it being a good fit under education and training, but that's where we put it. No matter where we put it, if it's set up right and it's supported, then it's going to thrive.
Well, thank you so much. We at Mvskoke Media, we like to talk to everyone and get the full rounded story, and we'll be talking with business owners that have taken part in TERO, some that have seen it as a plus, some that maybe aren't as happy with it, and then other members of administration and those in place in education and training that can speak to it as well. But we want to thank you for coming in and getting the ball rolling.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason.
And there you have comments from Representative Dode Barnett, very candid in her comments about TERO, which we love, and we want the information to come directly from those that are tasked with legislating us and making laws and things like that. So it was wonderful to talk with her about it. And as we said earlier, we'll definitely have continuing coverage on what happened today at the council.
Mm-hmm. And we'll keep posted also for some of these other bills sitting in the back too.
You bet. You bet. Well, as we said earlier, very happy to be in the newsroom today, rapping with Sterling Cosper about a lot of the things that have been going on with TERO. If you want to, as we said earlier, use as a reference some of this coverage that we're referencing, go to MvskokeMedia.com. You'll have it all there in our news segment. Also, go to our documents segment, look over all of that, and that's where you'll find your timeline, as well as all of the news stories we're coming up with. Stay with us on Facebook, on Twitter, and all of our social media outlets. We always have giveaways and everything, so keep aware of Mvskoke Media out there on the web. We'll see you guys next week.